course, we also welcome members of the public who are joining us by watching the webcast on YouTube. So I'm just going to read out a statement at the start of the meeting. So I'd like to remind everybody present that the meeting will be held remotely and streamed on YouTube. You're requested to turn off your mobile phones and to put yourselves on mute unless you are making a contribution, because the meeting is being recorded. You're also asked to raise your virtual hand if you wish to contribute or if you want to ask a question, and then to take that hand down after you've finished your contribution. Thank you. So I'm going to start this time with the apologies. I have received an apology from Councillor Ken Hughes, and I have two portfolio holders, Councillor David Rhys Thomas and Councillor Robin Williams. Are there any other apologies? Chair, it's Anwen Davies speaking. There's also an apology from Councillor Alan Mummery. Thank you. I can see that Councillor Vaughan Hughes has joined us now. So I'll just go through a register of members. Councillor David Roberts, good afternoon. Councillor Trevor Lloyd Hughes, good afternoon, I'm present. I can see that Councillor Vaughan Hughes is here. Yes, I'm present, thank you. Councillor Alan Roberts, good afternoon. Councillor Margaret Roberts, good afternoon. Councillor Nicola Roberts. Nicola sent her apologies. Councillor Robert Llewellyn-Jones. And Councillor Glyn Haynes. Good afternoon. And we'll turn to the additional members. Mr. Dyfedwyn Jones. Mrs. Leo Johnson. Mr. Keith Roberts.
Mr. David Gruffydd.
Mr. David Gruffydd, Managing Director of Menter Môn. And then the portfolio holders, I can see that Councillor Bob Harry is here. Good afternoon. Councillor Meirion Jones. Good afternoon. Councillor Llino Smeti. Good afternoon, everybody. Are there any other portfolio holders present? No. And we've also received apologies from two portfolio holders and one member, as I said at the start of the meeting. So we'll turn to the officers who are present now. Mrs. Anwen Morgan, Chief Executive, good afternoon. Mr. Dylan Williams. Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, everybody. Mr. Robin Jones, Temporary or Interim Monitoring Officer, good afternoon. Mr. Arwel Wyn Owen, good afternoon, everybody. Mrs. Freya Owen, good afternoon. Rhian Jones, good afternoon. Emma Edwards, good afternoon. Susan Owen Jones, good afternoon. Helen Kilgannon. John Zalot, good afternoon. Anwen Davies, good afternoon. Mrs. Meirwen Hughes, good afternoon. And then we have the translators. We welcome you warmly as well. So I'll just emphasize, if you're not speaking, please put yourself on mute to ensure that background noise doesn't have an effect on the broadcast. So we're turning now to declarations of interest from members or officers. There we are. As I said, many times before. Can I ask you to be comprehensive in your presentations this afternoon? This is the last meeting that the Chief Executive, Mrs. Anwen Morgan, will be with us. We all know about her contribution to education on Anglesey, and then she became Assistant Chief Executive within the authority before being appointed Chief Executive. Unfortunately, she was thrown straight into the coronavirus pandemic, and she's worked very hard and put in some very long hours within the authority. Recently, the leader and I were in the Brwynog residential home in Amlwch, and it was good to hear the staff there thanking Mrs. Morgan for sending them the daily reports during the lockdown. So can I thank you for your service, and can I wish you a happy retirement? Thank you. So we'll go on with the agenda, and we'll turn to item 3, the minutes. Minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January. We've had the chance to look through them. So is anybody ready to propose that they're correct? Yes, I'm happy to propose. Councillor Alan Roberts. Is there a seconder? Anybody? Yes, thank you, Councillor Margaret Roberts. And I'm sure we all accept the minutes. So we'll go on now to item 4, which is the annual equality report for 2020-21. The main purpose of this report, of course, is to support the authority to fulfill its equality duty. I can see that the leader is the portfolio holder. I think that she's the portfolio holder for all the reports this afternoon. So it's going to be a busy afternoon for Councillor Llinnos Medi. So can I ask Llinnos to open the discussion, please? Yes, and I hope that my voice doesn't bore you throughout this afternoon. Obviously, this is an annual report. You have scrutinised these reports previously. We report on what the authority is doing to promote equality, and you can see from the report how extensive our ability is as an authority to reach the people who need that support, be it in education or care, and in the work by working for the council. And I hope from the evidence that you can see that you'll see that equality is an integral part of our work, and that breaking down barriers is an aim for all of us. I just want to thank the officers for bringing this together in a period where Freya and Rhian have an additional workload. And I'm grateful to them for presenting it comprehensively. The most important thing for me here is to say that this council is very keen to be an authority that ensures that there is no inequality. So with those few words, I'm sure that Freya and Rhian would like to present the report to you. I can see that the author is Freya Owen, so I'm going to ask you to talk about the report. Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity today to present this report to you. As the leader has mentioned, equality is a very extensive area, and it touches a number of council services and functions, both public services and corporate services affecting the workforce. So there is a general duty on us and every local authority under the Equality Act 2010 to ensure equality and to get rid of inequality. Councils has to publish aims every 4 years. Then we have to prepare an annual report on equality by the end of March. This is a statutory duty, as mentioned by the portfolio holder. So the purpose of the report is to show how we have gone about it to fulfill our duty, be they general or specific duties. So this is a report that draws together details from plans and work streams that have been implemented in the Council over the period. And I'd like to thank Rhian Jones, the Policy Officer, for her hard work in coordinating this report. So it's important to add as well that there is a requirement for us to include specific data about the Council workforce because of the timetable for gathering the information. The data does refer to the year ending March 2021, but the rest of the report refers to the situation up to the 31st of December 2021 to give you a more current picture of the situation. And although it has been another challenging year for the Council in dealing with the effects of the pandemic, there are examples of some very good work in terms of efforts to safeguard some of our most vulnerable communities. The Council has also continued to adapt to the challenges of the pandemic with staff working at home and virtual meetings being held. So that's a summary of the report, and I'm happy to answer any questions or to receive any comments. Thank you. Thank you. So over to you as members. Who's going to ask a question? Councillor Alan Roberts. Yes, thank you for that. I've been reminding myself about the discussion we had a year ago. You know, can you present this report in a format that's easier to read? You know, having all these graphs and statistics, you know, can be a bit tedious and the message isn't being conveyed. And then you tend to skip those. So you can find the things that you expect to see. Has this format been set or is it your choice? I do have another question. Thank you for the question. I think it's a very fair comment, and it's certainly something that we can work on as we prepare the report in future. You are correct. We are limited to a degree in terms of the information we have to include. You know, we have to include some specific information and data. Having said that, we have some flexibility in terms of deciding the best way of presenting that information. And with any report, the aim is to ensure that the main messages are conveyed. And I accept that we could consider how best to do that. So for this report, perhaps we need to think about cross-referencing. There is some information on pages 22 to 23 which does analyse the tables and the data, but I accept your comment and perhaps we could have another look at the format within the framework that is imposed on us so that we can better convey the messages. And thank you for that comment. I think you've answered my next question. Looking at the report, I personally don't like to label people, that we identify people as labels. You know, I want to get to know the person and not the label. Do you have to use these labels? Or is it your choice? Because I would like us to treat people. You know, I know some people who wouldn't like to be recognised about in terms of these categories. They'd like to be recognised by their names. You know, people don't want to be treated as labels. I think the data is something we have to collect, but as you can see from the graphs, There are a number of unknowns as well. So there is an option, and the majority have decided not to share that information with us. But we are expected to ask the question because this is the sort of data that the government requires of us. But I agree 100% with your comments. But when I was going through the report, I could see that many people wanted to keep that information confidential. I acknowledge that the option is there. You know, people might be hiding behind labels sometimes even. I think that the answer was given in the presentation that this is imposed by the Welsh Government, but perhaps they should consider whether this is the best way of collecting information and understanding people, their problems and their concerns and so on. Chair, can I just come back quickly? Without having that information, we wouldn't know what we needed to do to overcome any barriers that people face. So, of course, we respect people's right to keep that information personal. But it does help. But if we can get to know the public who receive our services or the workforce, as we get to know them, and then we can try our best to get rid of anything that prevents them from flourishing. Thank you. Margaret Roberts. Thank you. Like Councillor Alan Roberts, you know, I thought that you need to bin the template, bring us something more readable. My question is, what steps have you put in place to ensure that children and vulnerable people don't face inequality as a result of the pandemic? Once again, Chair, in the report you can see the way that the Education Department has responded during COVID, you know, giving children Chromebooks and ensuring that they have internet access. Schools have also been given the Carolan grant to help them to respond. And for us as an authority, we've been very fortunate in the relationship that exists between education and social services. So there is knowledge of the children, and that has been very important for us. We have joint plans with welfare officers and so on. And new plans will be coming into existence in schools to identify the challenges and what's needed in addition now. Every school has received the Carolan grant so that they can do things as they want to do things. Schools can use the funding to respond to the challenges they face in their schools. So that grant does exist now, and in future we'll need to make sure that the structures are there if needed and that they're funded in future, because it's not just this year that we'll be dealing with the effect of the pandemic. Yes, I agree with that. I worry sometimes that you have children falling through the cracks. You know, people don't know about them because they've fallen through the cracks. And that's what's good, because they're back in school now. I think the concern was when they're not, when the schools are closed. Thank you. Would you say that the Council has successfully achieved the equality aims? I'd say that the Council has done everything it can to try to do that during this period. Some are more challenging than others, and the emergency or the pandemic has made them more difficult to achieve. But they are an integral part of the Council's work and their second nature, really. It's a strength now. And in 5 years, when we look back, you know, when you look at an annual report, 12 months isn't a long time to make a difference. But if you measure longer periods of time, I think you'd see much more progress. And we need to take into account the effects of the pandemic on equality as a whole. People have had to self-isolate and lock themselves out of the world. You know, we told people to self-isolate and stay out of the community at the start of the pandemic. Councillor David Roberts. Looking at one of the key scrutiny questions, it asks, how is it intended to ensure that the socio-economic duty becomes an integral part of the Council's work? Anglesey isn't the richest county in Britain, is it? So socio-economic disadvantage exists in all of our communities. If you are at the socio-economic disadvantage, things are against you anyway. So it's hard to see. If you are under socio-economic disadvantage, unless we can get rid of it, you know, discrimination or not discriminating will not make a difference. We've had a briefing session on socio-economic duty to raise awareness. That's something for us all as councillors to consider. So that's one step forward. And for example, with the Ambition Board, we asked the question in the Ambition Board now about socio-economic duty. The question is, how does that reach our communities? Well, we have to start somewhere, and you know, starting projects, having discussions with developers, and how we are going to evidence that we will make a difference, and that we make decisions that are a little different to achieve that duty or fulfill that duty. But we're just starting on this journey, really. And I'd like to think that over a period of time, we will see the difference. And that duty will have to counterbalance with other duties as well. And that will be a challenge. For example, if you look at procurement and the procurement rules, you know, where does this duty fit in there, for example? You know, it's something to consider in terms of our economic development department and our regional working. Thank you. I can't see any other hands up. Please shout out if you want to ask a question. Alan Roberts. Yes, I totally agree with what Chinos has just said. Studies have been undertaken in different parts of Britain and in other countries about disadvantage and poverty. And education is often crucial to break this cycle, which often runs from one generation to another. So education is definitely important in this context, that we ensure that these individuals who live in the poorest communities on the island do gain full access and are helped to reach their full potential and to make education something positive in their lives so that they do go on to succeed and then to go for these jobs that will give them better life opportunities. But I accept that housing is important, work is important, and education is essential to this battle to break this circle. Chair, if I may come back, when you think about the new school developments we've undertaken over the last few years, and perhaps in some of those challenging wards, for example, Santes Dwynwen School in Newborough, Ysgol Cybi in Holyhead, and plans to add an extension to Ysgol Graig, those are wards where society isn't as equal as we'd like it to be. So we have invested in education in those areas and invested in our children to show that we do value them and we value their education. I think that's one of the strengths in the school modernisation programme. Thank you. Before I bring this item to a close, do you want to add anything, Freya or Heian? You're welcome to come back if you wish. No, I'd just like to thank you for your valuable comments today. Thank you. So the recommendation is the committee is invited to provide comments on the annual equality report 2020-21 before it is submitted for delegated approval by the portfolio holder for publication. I'm sure you're all ready to accept the report. Please raise your hands if you agree. Thank you. And thank you to Freya and Trian. So we'll go on now to item 5. Population Needs Assessment, Social Services and Wellbeing, Wales Act 2014. So what we have here is an overview of the North Wales Population Needs Assessment 2022 drawn up under the Social Services and Wellbeing Act 2014. Mr. Arwel Owen, the Head of Adults, is here, and Emma Edwards, the Social Services Business Manager. So once again, I'm going to ask Shinos, the portfolio holder, to open the debate. As you said, this comes under the Social Services Act, and it is the responsibility of the RPB. The report has gone through the RPB. A number of partners have contributed, and Emma Edwards contributes on behalf of the authority to this work to bring this report before you. So it's important that I also note that the officers who've undertaken this work have also been dealing with the pandemic. So I'd like to thank them. You know, the Social Services, Public Health Wales, and the Health Board who've contributed to this work. And this provides a foundation so that we can move on to assure ourselves that we do provide what is expected under the population's needs. So through the regional framework, that is statutory requirements under the Act. So can I echo what you've just said, and certainly we are grateful to staff for their work. I'm going to turn to Mr. Arwel Owen first of all. Thank you. Yes, we are presenting this document, as Councillor Shinos Mehdi said. A lot of work has been put in to prepare the document. A lot of research has been undertaken, and we've consulted with a number of organisations. And it's been a lot of work in terms of the aims. The requirement is outlined in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act 2014. I think the timing is unfortunate. It would have been beneficial if this had taken place after releasing information from the census, but we have to stick to the requirements of the Act. It does give us a comprehensive picture of what we have and what we have at the moment and what we anticipate the need will be, and through that we can see any gaps in our services. Based on this analysis, we'll be expected to move on to create an analysis on market stability to see what gaps exist locally and regionally, with a view of trying to address in future those gaps. And by the end of next year, we'll have an action plan to move forward and address those matters. So there's a comprehensive picture here. It gives us a picture of the care needs, care and support needs, the health needs, and it provides a foundation for us to build upon in future. There's an opportunity for us to jointly plan with other authorities, but it also does identify areas where we can work more closely together, where we might not have the expertise or where we can share expertise, or to bring things together to secure the best benefit for our users. At the end of the document, you'll see a more local interpretation or analysis under section 8, which is our local contribution. We've looked in detail at the document and tried to provide a more relevant picture for Anglesey. So with that, I present the document to you and I'm happy to answer any questions. Does Emma have anything to add? No, I don't think so. I think everything was covered there. And for us to remember that there is an appendix. Those of you who received a paper copy, there is an appendix as well, which contains a wealth of information. So who wants to make a comment or ask a question? Anybody? Nobody. Councillor Alun Roberts. I'm sorry about that. I was listening to what Arwel was saying at the end by referring to Anglesey. Do you feel that the unique needs in Anglesey have come out strongly enough here? It appears as if they had, but are you certain that Anglesey's voice and Anglesey's unique needs, for example, in terms of the Welsh language, which is crucial to us on the island, are you confident that this has come through strongly in this report? Because there's so much variety across the North Wales region. If you look at Wrexham, for example, most of that county is Wrexham town itself. Anglesey is different. So is Anglesey's voice strong enough in this document? Do you want me or Arwel to respond, Chair? Yes, it's up to you. Arwel? I think in terms of the consultation, and you'll see in part 8 of the report, there is an appendix for Anglesey. The contributions and responses we received to the consultation on Anglesey have been very praiseworthy compared to a number of other areas. We would have liked to have more responses, but considering the circumstances we were operating under, we're pleased that we received such a good response in a way. What I'd say is that this sets a framework, it sets a direction for the future. We can choose our own route, which route we want to go down. We can adapt. So there's an advantage to having a framework, but we can act individually and adapt elements for ourselves. So to do those things that are relevant and unique to Anglesey where required, and in other areas we can share expertise with other authorities and other organisations. Thank you for that. That's what I saw, but I also wanted you to share that you were confident that we could go down our own road. Chair, can I just add? I think a strength in doing this is that we collect this information for ourselves, but there are areas where you have the Welsh language, but which doesn't get the attention it deserves. So I think we can have an influence across the region in this respect, and we can help other areas where the Welsh language isn't as strong, because you do have Welsh communities across the region, and they have linguistic requirements in terms of the services they receive. So I can see that strengthening the regional work. It's interesting looking at this appendix and reading the comments. One thing that struck me straight away was something raised in a governor's meeting in one of the local schools which I represent. There's a reference here, for example. Some respondents said that everything needs to be improved to provide more attention, care and support to the parents of autistic children. I attended a governor's meeting recently, and the teacher who's responsible for this area in that school said that there was a child having to wait for 2 years to be assessed for autism. 2 years. And the governors were shocked, really, to hear this. I did get in touch with the officer who attends our committees and meetings, Fiona Edwards-Ellis. I did get in touch with her, and she explained to me that the problem lies with the health board, with the neurodevelopment department. And she said that it probably is a 2 years wait. So we receive regular reports in this committee where you have different public bodies coming together, be it community councils, county councils, health board, public services board, for example. This sort of problem needs to be looked at and discussed further in some of these meetings. So what's your opinion as leader? They are discussed, such as the one you mentioned now. Regional funding has been used to create a regional autistic service. You know, we've seen health being unable to appoint workers in some areas. The discussion is taking place, but the problem we have is taking time to train workers. You know, for example, we've had difficulties with the mental health service. And you'll remember when we were on the SCN Joint Committee, you'll remember that problems in health had an impact on schools. We do have the discussions, but the concern is that the training arrangements in the health board aren't as strong as they should be. There is a weakness which we've identified, and we've addressed this, for example, recently with occupational health therapists. But these things take time, and I'd like to assure you that the discussion about those gaps and weaknesses are taking place, and we are discussing where we can step in to support and to look at what we can do differently. And at a local level, we are trying to adapt in any way we can, so at least we have some impact on the effects. Thank you. Does anybody else want to ask a question or make a comment? Please shout out if you want to ask a question, because I can't see everybody on the screen. Well, thank you for that report. I'll turn to the recommendations. So the recommendation is that the committee supports the North Wales Population Needs Assessment 2022. I'm sure you're all happy to accept the report. Thank you. And thank you to Arwel and Emma. So we'll go to item 6. And there's also an appendix with this report as well. So a report on the progress on completing the Wellbeing Plan, the Wellbeing Assessment, and an update on the work of the Gwynedd and Anglesey Public Services Board. I think I'm turning to Llinell again. Thank you. I feel like a jack of all trades this afternoon. You know, it's interesting the question you asked in the last item about alignment with the Public Services Board. And I hope that locally you can see that we are trying to make our structures align so that the population's need assessment does feed in as well to the work led by Sandra. And I'd like to welcome Sandra Thomas here this afternoon. She's only just moved back to the authority. Oh, Sandra has moved to the Public Services Board and none from the Public Services Board has come back to the authority. So this is her first meeting in that post. Please don't ask her any difficult questions. So this is a progress report. You can also see the consultation template and the statistics and how we consulted 5 years ago. What's interesting about us on Anglesey is that we also use the place shaping work. We try to collate as much information as we can, which already exists, because people get fed up of speaking to us. We don't like to ask the same questions all the time. So we collate information that we already have and then provide that to Sandra and the team and use that. So I'm not sure if Sandra or Anwen wants to speak next, because Anwen and I are the statutory members of the Public Services Board. Of course, it isn't Anwen and I who are named in the Act, it's the leader and the chief executive, but they represent the authority on the Public Services Board. Mrs. Morgan, do you want to come in? Yes, thank you. I don't have much to add. Can I just emphasize today that the report does focus on the process that will be in place for drawing up the new plan, as it says in the recommendations in the first box, the first recommendation for information, an update on progress against the current wellbeing plan 2018-23 will be submitted separately. I fully acknowledge that there is a high level overview in this report, just to keep you in the picture as it is. But the report on the current wellbeing plan will be contained in a separate report. Thank you.
Well, there we are. Can we apologise? Sorry, I didn't welcome you at the beginning either. So apologies for that. And just congratulate you for your appointment to this post. Thank you very much. Have you got anything to add for us? I'll just add, thank you to Llinás and Anwen. The timetable for this is a little bit unfortunate at the moment. We fall between two stools, if you like, between the work that's happened with COVID, the information from the census that will come out at the end of the summer, hopefully, and the information from the report you've just had from Arwel and Emma. That is fresh. We need to reflect that information in these assessments as well. So what you have in front of you is more or less is a situation report as things stand at the moment, and those assessments show how the situation currently is and nothing more really. We'll be working over the next few months to get the sources in place so that those reports reflect those situations as they become available to prepare the new wellbeing plan next May in a way. So it's a situation report at the moment. Thank you very much. I am going to read, we do have key scrutiny questions, and I have a question here. Following the public consultation period, what will be the process and timetable when completing the final wellbeing assessment for the county? Sandra? Yes, we will be publishing the wellbeing assessments with as much information as possible by the end of May, and then we intend to adapt them to reflect the additional information just because of the unfortunate timing in a way. We have to introduce the wellbeing assessments as they are by May, but they'll be work in progress then to prepare the wellbeing assessment plan, and we'll be coming back to you to check that information as it comes to light so that you have total buy-in into the new wellbeing plan from next May 2023 onwards. There we are. So thank you very much for that. Does anybody else have a question or comment? I don't see Alan Roberts on the screen at the moment. There we are. you have a question? Just looking at the questions, the key questions here. And the second question here was, to what extent I've been sealing the serial through on with interest and seeing what's being said there. And do you feel that is a fair reflection of what's happening in that ward, for example? I noticed there was reference to caring for each other here. And I thought, oh, why isn't there a reference to serial ward, serial alliance and all the work that's happened in the last 2 years, which has been exceptional, to be honest, and all the volunteering that's happened. Maybe that data isn't as easy to get hold of, but when you live locally, you are totally aware of what's going on, as it were, here. And that's why I was just so glad that you are going to work on this and prepare with all this information, with the census, to give a better picture of the Welsh language in the ward and the wards and different information that will come out of the census as well, which will add value, true value, I think, to what we currently have and move the process forward so that we can work for the better of our communities. You've hit the nail on its head there, I think. I'm quite new to the post, and what we've seen from the data which we are presenting at the moment is that we have quite dependable data on a county level, but that the data down to the different communities, that is a little bit weak at the moment, so we need to depend on more information to feed into it. But you are totally correct, that is a weakness, and hopefully you'll see that improve. And of course, the information you've referred to and the work that's happened over the COVID period, there is a lag in a way between that data coming in also. So hopefully by the Wellbeing plan being ready, we'll have more information of that kind, but you've hit the nail on the head there. Can I just add, Chair, as regards the importance of your role here in Scrutiny as well? And that's why they are here, for you to look at and also to influence. And if you are of the opinion that they are correct or not, so I think it's very important that you do contribute to make sure that it is a true reflection of your area and your information regarding the area. If you can add any information, it just adds strength to the process as well. Yes, if I can just come back there, I was looking under culture there. Today, it's been decided, to be honest, in Beaumaris, that we're going to have a C1 festival. I'm not sure if that's what it's going to be called. It's a Welsh festival concentrating on the Welshness of the town. So there are things happening. The new, fresh things happening for the first time, which I'm very glad of, which is going to happen, and that Beaumaris is getting hold of their Welshness now and have decided to do things like this. Well, thank you for bringing us that breaking news, Ellen, hot off the press. Very good. When was the consultation done? Was it 5 years ago, was it? Yes, it was 5 years ago. You could arrange public meetings at that time, couldn't you? And you haven't been able to do that this time, have you? So have you depended totally on the internet and questionnaires, is it? Yes, mostly, but as you know, a lot of the community groups have adapted to be meeting on Zoom and on Teams. So there have been opportunities also to try and ask people's opinion to those same groups, but mostly virtually, and we've been limited. But now maybe as we've got months ahead of us, hopefully where we can maybe get better input from some individuals as well, face to face. Because maybe previously, to be honest, the response in the public meetings wasn't very good, was it, to be honest? I remember going to the Valley Hotel when there was a group there, and I think it was only 3 county councillors who were in attendance. So I'm not, it's important that we get the message out there to the public, isn't it? Mrs. Morgan, did you want to come in? That's exactly I wanted to say. Also, I was one of the officers with you in the Valley Hotel that evening, I think, and the response was a little disappointing. Agree that face-to-face meetings, of course, have their strengths. Possibly, I think more people do respond through Zoom. They're shorter meetings and it's easier for people to join. But that's exactly what I wanted to say as well, Gwilym. Thank you. Margaret? I just wanted to say the same about Zoom meetings. I was in a very depressing one cold evening, and I thought, well, if this is the source of information, well, it was very disappointing, to be honest. And I agree, I don't think face-to-face, I don't know how we get around this, because very often I think we get information from one sector only, maybe, and not enough variety. I think we need to look at it better. And another thing for myself, I think, was looking at Twrcelyn and Lligwy together. And I thought, well, Twrcelyn and Lligwy, the same data isn't quite fitting both areas, if you understand what I mean. I'm not sure. Maybe that's myself being a little bit parochial, but I'd say it is a problem, be it Zoom or face-to-face publicly, to get enough information. That's half the problem, I think. If I could just come in quickly on that last comment, that is true about other areas as well. And I did raise it in the last Public Services Board about Ynys Cybi and Holyhead being one, and Trather Bay and different areas of Holyhead being very different. So that's why it's important that we do contribute to the conversation. That's why that recognition we have as elected members then ensures that the Wellbeing plan gets to grips with the needs of the team to greet those issues. So I would just say that's not something, it's been a discussion in the Public Services Board, and it's true of Gwynedd and areas there as well. And it is noted there as well. There's a store of information in every part of Anglesey, isn't there, really? Anyone else want to add anything or ask a question? I have my hand up, sorry. David? There was talk, wasn't there, about the place shaping in this conversation, and I think as someone who is from Brorhosir, I had hopes for the place shaping process, but I don't think it's got to grips in this area as other areas. And I think we're quite jealous of the places like Serial. So I'm not sure if it's because we haven't got a centre, for example. Serial, you've got Beaumaris, which draws people in. You've got the centre, everybody goes to Beaumaris. Maybe Gaerwen is also an area as well, but is that what's going to come first, the plan or the ability to bring people together, because I'm not sure if it's the horse or the cart which comes first, and I'm not sure how we're going to move forward with that. Is there intention to restart the place shaping programme? Are there new ideas at all? Place shaping has tried to continue during this period, and there are areas, obviously not on the same scale, but there are areas who have been trying to continue. It is true to say that place shaping is going to be different in every area. The want to get to grips with the work and the commitment is going to be different in every area. And the needs are also different in every area. So I think what's important is that the principle of place shaping exists by the authority in partnership with the Medryn Môn, and that has worked well because people have turned up to discuss their own patch, and in the Dinorban, for example, but wherever they've turned up to have that conversation, they have turned up, and we've been able to collect a lot of information. But the pandemic emergency has, had an impact on the way that was moving forward, and in moving forward, we'll have to look and the change of wards now as well, because in the Town and Community Forum, they were keen for us to keep it on a ward footprint level because it was easier for them to know where their boundaries were. I think the principle of place shaping does continue, and I think we have to be empathetic to the fact that some areas are going to be different to others. Different strengths and different weaknesses in different areas. And if those areas aren't ready at this time to get to grips with it, that we move that resource to areas that are ready, and with time, hopefully that'll come. And the emergency has also brought community groups closer together. And maybe there are some areas we wouldn't have thought would be as mature, ready to go earlier as well. So what's important to Sandra is that they have access to that information, which other groups that have come together following that place shaping process. And that's what is important, and why I noted at the beginning that that information is available to make sure that wellbeing plan does coincide with the needs, but not to get down with the process, I think, because Talabolion, where you need half a day to go around the ward in Talabolion, for example. So I'm aware that there are going to be different challenges in different wards. Yes, I understand what you're saying there. The fact that the ward boundaries are going to change in May, that's obviously, we've had a meeting in Llifon ward with Medron officers, and they are keen to keep with the current boundaries, but I'm not too sure if that's going to work in future, to be honest, when there will be new communities coming in, but then, for example, joining Caergeiliog and Valley and so on, and we lose Rhosneigr and Llanfaelog from that particular ward. So I'm not sure. They do say to me, a study has already been done in Bringwran and Gwalchmai, so we'll see what exactly will happen there. Any other questions? Mr. Williams, Dylan Williams? Thank you, Chair. I think Mrs. Morgan was before me. Not at all. I would agree in full with what the leader is saying. For you to be aware also the data and all the information that Medron have is available to Sandra and the team also, and that data should be used. The leader referred to the fact that COVID and how the communities work differently. Of course, we do have plans in place now resulting from COVID out of the Good Turn scheme. A number of areas have those, and I think what Dylan is going to say, Susan Owen-Jones is with us today, and she has the pleasure of being the lead officer for place shaping. And I know that Susan has already been in discussions with different areas. Just for information to you. Dylan, over to you. Thank you. Yes, I would like to just add to that we need, and we just need to take stock, as you'd say, of where we have got to, what we need to learn, how the pandemic has affected our communities. But from David's perspective, the mapping needs to happen first. My understanding next is that then drive some kind of governance or group in the area, and then hopefully the process of collecting data will come and bring those individuals who have a contribution to make and who are keen to collaborate, that they bring those to fruition, that those people will lead through an alliance then to recognise the priorities, and it's then those priorities that drive the work stream, but understand that something visual does help, because Bumaris, you know, the centre was there's lots of professional people in the society had come together to save the centre, and then as a community group, so the development of place shaping happened from a different kind of foundation there. But maybe what I would suggest outside the meeting, maybe if you had an initial conversation with Susan, and then maybe bring Medron in. And I think we as a council also have to come to some kind of decision when we agree on the model, to what extent of ward we are working on. I think we have to adapt with the new wards and new boundaries, because then that makes it easier for yourselves and the new elected members. And we're starting then to create different layers, but that the consistency is there geographically, which means that everybody can work much better and effectively together. Apologies for the long answer. Thank you. No, thank you for that contribution. Councillor Trevelyan-Hughes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've tried to pick everything up from the reports. I just want to congratulate everyone, really, because I think it's nice to see something like this in such a meeting and that it's very useful for everyone. The only thing that I am concerned about is, of course, as Gwilym mentioned, that everybody's a little bit parochial. Within his Cubby, you've got half of Holyhead and Trother Bay and Rhosgolyn as well, which is different people and clients. So it's difficult for you also to look at that information. But I do congratulate this programme. I'm very grateful for this information, and I must say, well done, you. Well done, everyone. Okay, thank you. So, is there anybody else that wants to say a few words or contribute? No? Okay, thank you very much, everyone. A very interesting discussion. So the recommendation we did, timetable, Wellbeing Plan, which is published in May 2023. And the scrutiny is requested to note and offer observations on the Anglesey draft wellbeing assessments, in addition to note the information which has been collected about the 6 areas and consider whether this is a fair reflection of the state of wellbeing in the area and whether anything is missing. And for information and updates on progress against the current Wellbeing Plan 2018 to 2023 will be submitted separately in accordance with the timetable agreed in the Scrutiny Committee meeting held in November 2021. Are we happy to accept the recommendation? Yes, everyone in agreement? Thank you very much. And thank you to you as officers also for your contributions there. We'll go on therefore to item 7, which is the Regional Emergency Planning Services Annual Report. As we know, the Council has a duty in relation to emergency planning and responding to them under the Civil Act, Contingencies Act 2004. And I think I'm correct in saying that Flintshire, who lead on this, and we have 2 with us here today, 2 officers, Helen Kilgannon and also Jean Zalot. So I'm going to ask again the leader to open the conversation for us. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you. Just quickly, it's difficult to think back in 2004 when the regional body was created to deal with an emergency, that we are going to face one of the biggest emergencies maybe in a lifetime, and maybe for some of you that you don't see this service, but John does attend the emergency meetings, and to me, John is a familiar face. So just so that you know that you do receive service as elected members. And it's just important also that I note that Susan is the link to the SLT now, and during that pandemic period, strengthening that relationship has existed, and we have been bringing you a progress report to deal with. Helen is a new officer, has taken over during the pandemic period, and John has come during the pandemic period as well, I think. So 2 new members of staff during the emergency period. But as you are aware, it is a statutory role, and we have gone into partnership, and this report just shows you that the regional structure has been maybe a strength and has been challenged. It's there's no doubt there's been challenges, but sometimes going through challenges is how you build something stronger. And also just to make it all more aware of the expectations to respond to emergencies we have as an authority. So I'm not sure if Dylan or who do you want to or Helen first. Mr. Dylan Williams first, I think. Thank you, Chair. Just a few points to add. The least we see of people like Helen and John, the better, I suppose, because that means we're in a planning world and not a emergency world. And as the leader has noted there, we've been seeing a lot of each other recently, and that's simply because we've been in an emergency period and in a crisis management period, which is quite essential. And I would like to apologise or say that's why a report wasn't presented last year, because everybody was trying to manage the pandemic rather than planning forward and preparing for and going through planning. The collaboration in this area happens locally. We continue prepare and respond with regional assistance. This happened about 2 weeks ago with the bad weather. You'll remember when the wind and the storm was on the horizon, but it wasn't as bad as everybody had imagined. But the planning work in the background continued to make sure that considerate decisions were made. So the local team in the council are active with the regional team, but also I think importantly with other partners in the public sector, because with emergency planning, it is the blue lights, local authorities, Welsh Government, everybody together is the response. And without that structure and arrangement, I think it would be fair to say it would be a bit of herding cats, I think, and everybody would be working to their own cultures and their own separate issues. And as a result, then, the ability to respond considerately, but also in a timely manner, that's very important in this area, would be missing. So the regional team can bring everyone together and ensure there is a process, a culture and structures which are effective in place so that they can be used accordingly. We are hopefully coming out of a very strange period, and I think it would be fair to say John and Helen would agree that we need to take stock now of where we are, review what has worked well during the pandemic, what hasn't worked as well, what can we improve for the future, and maybe to relook at the model to an extent to make sure it continues to be effective and that we learn. But I would like to thank Helen and John for supporting the council and also the officers that were there before them, many there for a number of years and who have now and have enabled the council and the region to set a foundation which has enabled us to deal with this pandemic effectively. And without that foundation of working collaboratively before the pandemic, I think it would have been more difficult for everyone to work together in a timely and considerate manner and to keep everyone safe, to be honest. And that's the whole purpose of this at the end of the day, to protect people and keep our residents safe and ensure business continuity when there is a true need for that. And I hope that the committee and everyone recognises that the last year or two have enabled that to happen. And with those few words, I'm not sure, Chair, if you want Helen maybe to highlight a few points from the appendix and the regional report in the paper. Thank you. Yes, before I bring Helen in, can we just ask you about the situation now on the island? You know, as I do, when we had quite heavy industries on the island, a number of those industries had their own emergency plans, and there were regular exercises being held. I took part in some myself in the Wilva nuclear station, for example. What's the situation with, RF Valley, Holyhead Port, if there was an oil slip or something like that? Do these organisations have their own emergency planning? It's simply, the answer is yes. Everyone works together. Everyone knows the statutory duties. Do you remember the Marina storm disappearing in Holyhead? That's an example. We used to meet every morning and every afternoon for at least 2 weeks as an emergency team. And there was representation in that regional team. Stenna were there. Everyone from the port was there to be able to respond to that emergency. And I think before COVID, that was the final emergency one we had locally. There has been flooding on the mainland, but the challenges and the areas where action is needed is a bit different from county to county. But through this structure, there is a test exercises which do take place, training takes place, and usually the organisations that would respond in a true emergency are part of those, so that people get to know each other and that the structures and response processes are as robust as possible, but also recognise that they are hypothetical, and in the true world, nobody truly knows how things are going to go. Thank you. Helen, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to add that we do exercise with our multi-agency partners, and through that exercise we get to learn more about each agency, and also when we do come to respond to an incident, we have the knowledge of the people we're working with. So it's really good joint working across all agencies in North Wales. I did want to point out some of the work we've done over COVID. Obviously, it's been quite a testing time across the pandemic for all organisations, and whilst our business as usual took a bit of a backseat, we maintained all our statutory duties during the course of the pandemic, and we were also challenged by staff turnover. But luckily, our recruitment has been very successful over the last 12 months, with John and some other new people coming into the service that have brought a wealth of experience from other organisations such as the police, fire and NRW, which strengthens our team somewhat, and we have reached now a new level of maturity. So that's been really positive. Some of the things we've done to support the local authorities across North Wales is around the temporary body storage facility to alleviate the strain on the mortuary capacity with health, looking at the relocation of maternity services to safeguard the expectant mothers, and then looking at troubleshooting and identifying potential sites for the mass and local vaccination centres. We've also attended the local resilience forum meetings on behalf of the local authorities, and also contributed and attended all the subgroups, as well as providing information and guidance to local authority members at the strategic coordinating group. We've also completed work on surge testing after Anglesey and Holyhead had been a pilot in North Wales. We took some of the lessons learned there and adjusted the plans accordingly, so that we're forever and constantly evolving our plans to reflect what's actually happening in the local area. John, I don't know if you want to touch on some of the incidents we've dealt with in Ynysmore in the last year or so.
Sure, thanks, Alan.
Good afternoon, everyone. Yes, so a lot has happened since I've begun in May of last year. Just to recognise the storms is one of them, as Mr. Dylan Williams referred to last year, and with Storm Eunice, Dudley and Franklin. Also, we dealt with the bus strikes and have dealt with a bit of panic with the fuel crisis last year as well. And thankfully, it haven't been big incidents, but a lot of learning has come from that. For example, with what happened with the petrol, learned how on the island we could respond to that. And thankfully the council were prepared already, where their petrol stocks were up, but that just concentrates now on going into the period that we have to know how prepared we were going into that. And also with the storms, thankfully, nothing major came up from that, and as a result we had enough time to get the emergency services together to be able to speak and know where everybody was at as regards the situation in the council. Also, the situation was quite good, thankfully, and also still learning. It doesn't matter how good things go, it's important that we learn from those and note towards the future. Thank you. And who do you work for, John? So I work for the service, the regional service itself, but I work with the Anglesey County Council specifically. There's an officer for each council. Oh, thank you. So have you got a question? Who's going to ask the first question? David Roberts? You're on mute, David. Apologies. No, I've been looking through the reports, and obviously one concentrates more when the name of Anglesey comes up. You take more of a notice, obviously, with the flooding and so on. But with the storms last time round, areas of the UK were severely affected, but our area wasn't as affected as other areas. Are there plans for what would happen if we did have as many power cuts as happened in Scotland and so on? How would we deal with something like that? We're lucky, really, it passed us by to an extent, but is there a provision for that, for example? Because from my understanding, people like Scottish Power don't have much people on the ground locally, do they?
Yeah, John?
John, or? Yes, I'm happy to answer. There's a lot of learning that's come from Scottish Power, for example, recently with the Arwen storm, the first one, which concentrated on the fact that a lot from their side that they have stood up, and lots of work they've done since then to concentrate on if there is a loss of power, there is a lot of work that they can do. So there's a lot of work that does come together when these TCGs come together, meetings to make sure that each agency comes on the table to speak together and starts to prepare. So there are plans in place at the moment. A piece of work is happening as a service for the council, different councils, is the emergency arrangements, and from the council perspective would be to work towards if there was an emergency. But as I say, a lot of work is also happening with people like Scottish Power to know what their role is if something went wrong. And that does happen because we often meet with organisations to see what would happen and who owns each piece of work. Thank you. And climate change, of course, is something which is in back of someone's mind constantly. We think Mr. Williams has already mentioned the storm which affected Holyhead a while ago. That is in the back of someone's mind constantly these days, isn't it? Anyone else who wants to come in? Any questions? Glyn, any concerns in Holyhead?
No, not this. No. The report's quite comprehensive, I thought. That's why I didn't really have any questions. They've answered a lot of any contingencies that might happen, and hopefully we won't have to face what we did in Holyhead in the past, but you never know.
Yeah, quite right. Right. Okay,
well, thank you very much. I don't think anybody else was. Sorry, Councillor Alan Roberts has his hand up. I was just going to refer to the bridges, but I'm going to use more local example. There was a unfortunate accident on Beaumaris Road last weekend, and the queues of traffic through the back roads were very bad. The place was locked, literally. Is when there is such an incident like this that does happen, are our processes of communication with the public sufficient in this kind of situation? I noticed that there's something on Facebook, for example, of the county council here. But should we go further and that the county council do have access to Facebook of the community councils maybe, or the villages and so on, so that the messages can get straight out to people, rather than waiting for people having to share messages as happened here? I've never had so many phone calls or emails or messages on my Facebook pinging so much during last Friday, Alan, what's happening? And I know it was just a few hours, but it's a situation that could come up again and maybe worse in future. So is our communication sufficient so that the messages get out quickly, that as needed at those kind of times? Dylan? Yes, accept the point. This is a controversial, really. Once there's a last minute change, the sooner the better we can get information out. We've got two excellent officers in the council, that gets quality information out that is totally bilingual, quickly and effectively. Maybe this is something we need to relook at following the election. You know, what's the role of local members is in their wards, and down to the community councils and town councils as well. That's great, isn't it, if communication traditional methods work. Where it becomes difficult is with a storm, for example. If the broadband disappears, if the Wi-Fi disappears, we're then going back to the jungle drums and the traditional methods of communication. And I think that's where we need to ensure that we have backup communication processes, just in case the social media platforms do collapse. And I think we're doing okay, but there is always room for improvement. Alan? Do you want to come back on that? No, agree. It's luck, really, that I happen to be working from home and got the information quite quickly to be able to learn. Naturally, everybody didn't get that information about the back roads here. And, you know, there was a backlog really for half an hour because they hadn't got the message. The county council had said use a particular road, but people had ignored that information or hadn't heard maybe also, which was part of the problem, I felt. Okay, thank you, Linos. Just quickly, I understand what the councillors saying, but 19,000 follow the county council account on Facebook and 13,000 on Twitter. So Dylan mentioned quickly, we have 2 excellent officers, and we are so lucky of those officers, but also our partners to share information. And I think the police and so on are part of that emergency team, and how we ensure those share the information as well. But emergency is going to happen, and doesn't matter how much planning you'll do, the people's behaviour then creates another emergency. But what's important from the report today is that you have confidence as a scrutiny committee that there are measures in place to deal with those emergencies and strong partnerships between those authorities to respond to those emergencies. I think that's very important. And what Alan has raised is maybe an issue for the regional body to ask the question, how are we communicating in very local emergencies and regional emergencies, and then the national strictures as well. And from what Dylan said, when there are access challenges to whatever platforms as well. Can I just note one thing that hits me with the discussion? When things get to the extreme, you know, for some reason, we have difficulties with water in this area, and you get an SMS or text if you've registered for a service, for example, saying that there's a burst pipe in Gairwin or whatever. But an SMS text, almost everyone has a phone, and in the end, even when Wi-Fi down, text still works. So maybe we could refer to that kind of system, maybe, but maybe people would have to register for the area, but that kind of system could be considered, maybe. It is something I've raised recently, and how we deal with that. We have access to a number of SMS through our schools because there are parents there and so on. So it is something we've raised, but I think it would be good if there was a emergency structure regionally in place so that you know, but you know, data management and it's very important and how we go around it, and also how the public update their information and so on. It is something I think we need to look into for the future. Thank you. Dylan, do you want to come back? Yes, I think it is an important discussion and subject, and the main question is what is local and what is relevant to the people who receive the information to make it considerate, and make sure that the people who want the information and need it get it quickly. And maybe this is a matter the committee could maybe ask the regional board to do a little bit of work on to see if there are good practices in the region and things maybe we in Anglesey can learn from. And I think that would be something reasonable to ask and maybe a good use of time as well. Yes, that's a very good point, I think, and I'm sure that when Davis has been taking notes there, and maybe we could ask and contact the regional group to ask them to do that piece of work and note the comment that Mr. Williams has just made now. Councillor Trevor Lloyd-Hughes. Thank you, Chair. What concerns me, I'm on Ynys Cybi, and Glyn Haynes and myself would be very concerned, I'm sure, if there was a serious emergency on the Cobb, the Valley Cobb, we couldn't come out of Holyhead, because it's very difficult also to see, it's easy for me to see, that the flooding that happened in Trevor Bay is going to create problems in years to come, because the water level is coming over with the football field area there, and you could be caught out there as well. So that could be an emergency, but we also think we need to be looking at these issues for the future and the years to come, because I believe that not because we are in Ynys Cybi, but maybe that you'd like us to get cut off. Maybe, I'm not sure, but that's what concerns me without going on the ship to Ireland or something like that. Don't suggest such a thing, Trevor. Well, thank you for your comments. Okay, a very interesting discussion and important point being raised there. With the comments made earlier, and I'm sure that Anwen has taken note of the comments that have been made, the recommendations are to ask the committee to note the progress of the North Wales Regional Emergency Planning Service work to date, and maybe we could also contact our colleagues to note our concerns, or maybe just ask them to look at the communication side and how we can work to the future. Are you ready to accept those recommendations, please? Thank you very much. And thank you to Helen and to John also for your contributions. Thank you. Okay, we are on the final item then. The 8th item, the North Wales Economic Ambition Board, which is an item for information. The Q3 progress report for 21-22. This is a report for information. I'm not sure if anybody's got anything you want to raise. From the report, we do get regular updates from the leader, and I'm sure we should all be aware of what's happening moving forward. If anybody wants to raise any points, you're welcome to raise it or make any comment at all. No? It is for information, and thank you to Anwen for arranging that we receive that information. So there we are, we've come to the end of the meeting. Thank you all for your attendance this afternoon as members and officers this afternoon, and thank you for your support over the last 5 years as well. Can I wish everyone who is standing in the election well, and in the same way we wish Councillor Vaughan Hughes well also, who won't be standing in the election. Thank you to all of you, to Meirwen, Anwen, and also to the translation team as well. And with those few words, can I note that the meeting is now over. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you to Recording stopped. Also.